How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. If you would like to be on the program, I would be very happy to have you. I got to read you this push alert from the New York Times. I saw it online. I didn't think it was true. I've got it on my phone here. A former Marine who choked a homeless man on a New York City subway train last year was found not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Really? Really? That's how you want to review it? Here's the Wall Street Journal. Former Marine Daniel Pinney was found not guilty of homicide in the choking of a homeless man on a New York City subway. You mean he protected the people on the train from the crazy schizophrenic? Justice has been done in New York City, and it's a good thing Daniel Pinney was found not guilty. The problem is every other potential good Samaritan is now going to be discouraged from saving people because they may get prosecuted. Pitiful. Now, I got to move on because we need to talk about the president. No, not that guy. Donald Trump. We need to talk about Donald Trump, not the existing president of the United States. It was wild to see the scene at Notre Dame this weekend. It was wild to see the Prince and Princess of Wales welcome Donald Trump to the British ambassador's house in Paris. It was wild to see Giorgia Meloni hanging out with Donald Trump, smiling and laughing as if he was in charge. It was wild to see Europe. And, you know, I should start with how the left is spinning this. The left is spinning this as, well, they all know that if you flatter Donald Trump, you can get your way with him. That's what was going on. No, what was going on was the European powers were treating Donald Trump as if he is acting president of the United States. Joe Biden is the incredible shrinking man. Jill Biden and Joe Biden were at Notre Dame. Or no. I guess Joe didn't go. Jill Biden was there, and Donald Trump was there. And the two of them seemed like they got along quite well. It is remarkable, though, that we are watching world leaders already acting as if Donald Trump is president of the United States. And I am a student of American history. I have paid attention to these things, and I do not recall this happening. Even when Barack Obama got elected, remember that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee gave him a Nobel Prize for doing nothing other than not being George W. Bush. I got in trouble at the time for saying it was affirmative action, but it really was. And people wanted to make it a racial thing, which, again, people say that there's no stigma attached to affirmative action. But when I said Barack Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize as a case of affirmative action, people on the left went nuts, saying I was racist. I was like, wait a second, you were the guys who think affirmative action's great. But that wasn't what I was talking about, and they missed the point to attack me. And the point I was making at the time was that there had not been enough anti-America haters getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and so they had to give it to Barack Obama, who the only thing he had done was beat George W. Bush, a man they all hated. But even when Barack Obama beat George W. Bush, he may have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, but you didn't have European leaders treating him as if he was the president of the United States. You have European leaders treating Donald Trump as if he is the incumbent acting president of the United States. And oh my gosh, he is the acting president of the United States, absolutely for sure. Nobody cares what Joe Biden thinks anymore. No one's paying attention. And they're having an absolute meltdown over Donald Trump. The left is and the media is. So here's part of the problem. You need to understand. The left does control the American media, even as they don't think they do. There's a thing here. I have been reliably informed that I'm too far right wing for some radio stations. If you're a Trump supporter, you're laughing at that. Here's the thing, though. No progressive in America believes he's super progressive. They all believe they're moderates, and anyone to the right of them by even a millimeter is super right-wing. No progressive believes they're progressive. They all think they're moderates. They all think they're centrists. Every progressive does. Members of the media who are super hyper-progressive think that they're moderates. All the rest of us are just super right-wing. I fell out laughing when I was told this. It was like, you should tell the Trump supporters, because I get told, I got a friend of mine who's a Trump supporter. He says, oh, you've got moderates. Like, there's literally nothing I've changed my mind on in the last 20 years in politics, and yet somehow I'm a moderate just because I don't care for Donald Trump. Even if I support him, I can give him money, I can vote for him, but nope, I got to be moderate because I'm not sufficiently Trumpy enough. It's wild to me. And I'm like, oh, you guys call yourselves conservatives. You're not a conservative. You support Trump. But on the left, they're like, oh, y'all are all violently right-wing, militantly right-wing. Okay. So I say that to say this. The left controls the media. They think they're all mushy moderates, and they think that the way for the media to cover Donald Trump is to be hysterical about everything he says. Donald Trump is Donnie from Queens. He says things like people on the internet say things. He doesn't necessarily mean them, but it gets the left riled up, and they think that the role of the press is to cover Donald Trump as insanely as they hear Donald Trump, not as you and I hear Donald Trump. I hear Donald Trump say some stuff that sometimes seems outlandish. I'm like, that's just the way he talks. He doesn't mean it. And so Kristen Welker on Meet the Press asked Donald Trump about prosecuting his political enemies.
No, I mean, he's going to do what he thinks is right.
Do you think that's right? Do you think that's right, sir?
If they think that somebody was dishonest or crooked or a corrupt politician, I think he probably has an obligation to do it. But
are you going to direct him to do it?
No, not at all.
So he's not going to direct Kash Patel to prosecute his enemies. And so what was the conversation over on MSNBC? They're having a normal one there about pardons.
There are a lot of positive reasons to be doing this kind of protective pardon, so that you actually are upholding the rule of law and you're not subjecting people who obeyed the rule of law to these kinds of threats, especially when one thing that is completely absent is any, as you said, Jen, any statement of fact about why these people would possibly be prosecuted. In other words, there's nothing which anyone has articulated as to what on God's green earth Dr. Fauci, a national hero, did other than save, really, you could say, millions of lives across the...
All right, I can just have this here. These are progressives trying to justify their extreme position. Realize preemptive pardons are an extreme position, never been done before. And now they're like, it's perfectly fine. We should consider doing these sorts of things. Here's another.
There's a legal answer, and then there's a pragmatic answer. The legal answer is it's absolutely okay. The Supreme Court in 1866 in the Garland case said that the president's pardon power is unlimited, and that it extends to anything, including action pardons before legal proceedings are taken. So there's a clear precedent on that.
They're willfully trying to justify extremes, saying we're actually moderates, and this is a moderate thing to do to stop Donald Trump. It's bizarre. And so what does Donald Trump actually want to do to people who didn't vote for him?
To treat you every bit as well as I have treated the greatest MAGA supporters. There's never been anything like MAGA in the history of this country. These people are so dedicated to making America great again. It's very simple. And I'm going to treat them just the same as I treat MAGA. We're going to treat everybody good. We want success for our country. We want safety for our country. You know, our country's under threat, as you know. We have a tremendous threat militarily because of the power of weapons and weaponry. It's a tremendous threat. Nobody talks about it, but it's a tremendous threat. I want to treat everybody the same. I want to treat them well.
I want to treat everybody the same. I want to treat them well. That's what he said. And the media is driven to hysterics by Donald Trump. And yet he's coming across statesmanlike. Again, on Jerome Powell, there's a massive movement among Donald Trump supporters to get him to fire Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve.
The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said he will not leave his post even if you ask him to. Will you try to replace Jerome Powell?
No, I don't think so. I don't see it. But I don't. I think if I told him to, he would. But if I asked him to, he probably wouldn't. But if I told him to, he would.
You don't have plans to do that right now?
No, I don't.
Don't have plans to fire Jerome Powell. And what about NATO?
Sir, will the United States stay in NATO while you're in office?
In where?
NATO. Do you commit that the United States will remain a member of NATO while you're in office?
Again, they have to pay their bills. If they pay their bills, absolutely.
But not if they don't pay their bills.
But NATO's taking advantage of us because we were look, two things. Number one, they take advantage of us on trade, meaning the European nations, okay, like terrible. They don't take our cars. They don't take our food products. They don't take anything. They take, it's a disgrace. And on top of that, we defend them. So it's a double whammy. So let me just tell you, I was able to get hundreds of billions of dollars put into NATO just by a tough attitude. I said to the countries, I'm not going to protect you unless you pay. And they started paying. And that amounted to more than $600 billion. That's a big thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be fighting. They wouldn't have any money to fight. If they're paying their bills, and if I think they're doing they're treating us fairly, the answer is absolutely, I'd stay with NATO.
Sounds like a reasonable position, does it not? As long as they foot their share that they say they're already going to pay, that they're not paying, we stay in NATO. Sounds a little more pragmatic than his prior position. But wait, there's one more that is driving the media absolutely insane with how reasonable Donald Trump comes off. Yes, reasonable Donald Trump.
The dreamers are going to come later, and we have to do something about the dreamers because these are people that have been brought here at a very young age, and many of these are middle-aged people now. They don't even speak the language of their country, and yes, we're going to do something about the dreamers.
What does that mean?
And
what are you going to do?
I will work with the Democrats on a plan, and if we can come up with a plan, but the Democrats have made it very, very difficult to do anything. Republicans are very open to the dreamers. The dreamers, we're talking many years ago, they were brought into this country. Many years ago. Some of them are no longer young people, and in many cases, they become successful. They have great jobs. In some cases, they have small businesses. Some cases, they might have large businesses. And we're going to have to do something with them. And
you want them to be able to stay. That's what you're saying.
I do. Okay. I want to be able to work something out. And it should have been able to be worked out over the last 3 or 4 years. And it never got worked out. You know, Biden could have done it because he controlled, Congress to a certain extent, right? He could have done something, but they didn't do it. I never understood why, because they always seem to want to do it. But then when it comes down to it, they don't. I think we can work with the Democrats and work something out.
I think we can work with the Democrats to work something out. This sounds entirely reasonable. Here's the thing you all of you, whether you're a supporter of Donald Trump or not, need to understand. He's got nothing left to prove. He doesn't need to earn your vote. He can never run for office again. He doesn't need to earn it. He has beaten the Democrats. He's beaten the media. He's beaten the Republican Party into submission. He can be his own man now. Now, that can always be dangerous. It can be dangerous. Look at George W. Bush. When he got his second term, he was off the chain, too. Tried to do Harriet Myers, tried to do amnesty, all that sort of stuff. Donald Trump wants a deal on the dreamers. Look, the kids who came here as like a 2-year-old illegally with their parents, they're now 20-something, 30-something years old. They got a small business. This is the only country they've ever known. I think it would be cruel to tell that person, you're not actually one of us, go home. I think it would. Sounds like Donald Trump agrees with me. But the person who's come here under Joe Biden, send them home. They've only been here for 4 years. Send them home. Make them come through a legal pathway. We should be able to nuance between the people who've been here 20, 30 years, done nothing wrong. Their parents brought them over here when they were little versus the person who's come in the last 4 years. And we should start with the criminals. Start with the criminals. Start with the gangs. Start with all those people. Start with people who've already been ordered to deport and haven't, and we can have a conversation. But we shouldn't be scared by this. This is a reasonable Donald Trump, and the left thinks that everyone should be driven to hysteria by him. He's going to be president of the United States. The Europeans are already treating him like it. Americans might as well start paying attention and not be fearful by what he says. Everything he said should be viewed pretty reasonably. Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. There are a couple of things that are happening right now. Let me bring you up to speed. This is from CNN. Quote, the man who is being held in Pennsylvania in connection to the United Healthcare CEO killing was in possession of a 2-page document railing against the healthcare industry, suggesting violence is the answer, according to a police official who has seen the document. Now, maybe, just maybe, this guy wasn't the killer and was just applying for the job of president of an Ivy League institution. If so, he'll have some anti-Semitic literature as well. But that tracks for being the president of an Ivy League institution as much as it tracks for being a madman. The other thing that you need to know is there's a lot of question as to how could the jury in the Daniel Penny case have been divided over whether he was guilty of manslaughter, but then very united very quickly that he was not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Having served on a jury and also been a criminal defense attorney and worked for a district attorney, let me just say this. One, juries are unpredictable, but also when prosecutors maneuver like that to drop a serious charge in favor of a lesser charge, a lot of the jurors will rapidly conclude they didn't mean it. And I'm not surprised that the jury wound up rapidly concluding he was not guilty if the prosecutor was so eager to drop the negligence charge or the manslaughter charge in favor of criminal negligence. Doesn't surprise me at all that a jury would come to the conclusion the prosecutor never meant it and dispatch the case. Now, I got to tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them for less than $200 and save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. What you do is go to EdenPureDeals.com. You'll see a discount code box right on the front page of that website. So go to EdenPureDeals.com and put in Eric3 in your discount code box. ERICK, the number 3, Eric3. What is the Eden Pure Thunderstorm? Well, it is an air purifier. It gets rid of pet dander, pollen, dust, the like. But also, it's an odor eliminator. It wipes out odors. It generates ozone that is attracted to the ions of odor particles, locks onto them, and neutralizes them. And the new Eden Pure Thunderstorm also gets rid of bacteria and viruses, 99.9% of bacteria and viruses. It also generates plasma. And as the bacteria and viruses flow through the thunderstorm, they are destroyed. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is Eric3. Get 3 of them, save $200. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code Eric3, ERICK3. Hello and welcome back. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, you're more than welcome to. We got a lot of stuff happening today. I want to, Randall emailed me. There's some confusion about the jury before I get into the NDAA stuff with Speaker Johnson that I wanted to talk about. Let me explain this one. Again, let me read you. This is the verdict sheet in the Daniel Penny case. A lot of people are wondering, how could the jury so quickly dismiss on the second charge when it took them so long and they were so divided over the first charge? This is manslaughter in the second degree. This is the charge. There's a bunch of legalese here, but I was actually a criminal defense attorney. In addition to having worked for a time in a prosecutor's office, been a lawyer. Let me read you this. This is manslaughter in the second degree. If you find the defendant guilty of count 1, manslaughter in the second degree, then do not consider and do not render a verdict on count 2, criminally negligent homicide. If you find the defendant guilty of count 1, manslaughter in the second degree, for the reason that the people have failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not justified, then you must not consider count 2, criminally negligent homicide, and you must also find the defendant not guilty of that count. If you find the defendant not guilty of count 1, manslaughter in the second degree, for some reason other than lack of justification, then proceed to consider and render a verdict on count 2, criminally negligent homicide. So what does all this mean? In New York and many states, you can file multiple criminal charges against a defendant. You can file greater and lesser charges. In this case, they had the strong charge of manslaughter in the second degree. Manslaughter in the second degree, you got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not justified in his actions. If you don't do that, then if you find for some reason other than lack of justification, you can go to count 2. Now, I don't have all of the jury instructions in front of me, but essentially the instructions are saying if you find him guilty of manslaughter in the second degree, ignore all the other lesser charges. That's it. If you don't find him guilty of manslaughter in the second degree, you have two paths. If you find him not guilty of manslaughter in the second degree for the reason the people failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was not justified, you can't consider count 2 criminal and negligent homicide. However, if you find the defendant not guilty of manslaughter in the second degree for a reason other than lack of justification, go to count 2. None of that matters at this point. Some of the speculation was, well, they found him not guilty on count 2 because they dismissed count 1. That's not true at all. That's a misreading of the situation. And to the extent that anyone wrote anything about it that muddied the water here, and I don't want to muddy the water, and I feel like maybe I am. Let me just clarify this one for you. First of all, the pieces that are circulating out there are very poorly written by people who aren't lawyers. The judge tossed the manslaughter in the second degree charge, so it's as if it never existed. And because it's as if it never existed, the instructions related to manslaughter in the second degree never existed with the jury. Essentially, the jury went back and they had to convince themselves, well, he's not charged with manslaughter in the second degree, so we're to consider criminally negligent homicide. The bottom line is this. When a jury sits for a trial and they are trying someone for manslaughter in the second degree, and then suddenly the judge and the prosecutor say, oh, our bad, pretend he was never charged with manslaughter in the second degree. You have a jury. Now, this was a divided jury on whether or not he was guilty of manslaughter. When the judge and the prosecutor called the jury in who's divided over whether or not he's guilty of manslaughter and say, our bad, pretend he was never even charged with that, go see if he's criminally negligent. Those jurors who were holdouts thinking this is serious are now going to go back into a jury room with a bunch of people who were insistent he was not guilty of manslaughter, and you're going to hear them make the argument like, guys, we told y'all he wasn't guilty of manslaughter, and now they want you to pretend he was never charged with manslaughter, just criminally negligent homicide. If they aren't that concerned about the case, maybe you shouldn't be either. And so you have a jury where at least one, but probably several, there were jurors who were wearing masks the whole time. I bet you they were the ones who wanted to find him guilty. Just speculation on my part, but come on, you know the type. They're insistent, we got to do something. This guy died. There's got to be justice. A man has died. Daniel Penny took his life. There's got to be justice. And they go back into court. They say, look, we're divided. Some of us don't think he's guilty. Some of us do. We can't come to unanimity here, which is required under the law. And the judge's like, hey, guys, just pretend we never even charged you with manslaughter. Just go look at criminally negligent homicide. Those holdouts are going to be like, clearly they don't care. Clearly this is for show, so not guilty. They wasted our time. I'm interested to hear the jury interviews. I really am interested in hearing the jury interviews on this one. But that's what happens when a prosecutor demands manslaughter of the second degree and then says, our bad, let's just go with criminally negligent homicide if y'all can't agree. The jury's going to be like, you guys have wasted our time. This guy's not guilty. We want to go home. That's the situation. Daniel Penny's been acquitted, and it's a very good thing. So now, So now, we need to move to the Speaker of the House. The NDAA is the Defense Authorization Bill. The National Defense Authorization Act. It is the appropriations for the United States Armed Services. And the NDAA is actually a very big piece of legislation funding our military. Here's the way the NDAA works. The House and the Senate make their appropriations. They do behind-the-scenes negotiations to get both sides to agree to certain positions on the NDAA. And both sides have things they want to get into the NDAA. Both sides have things they want to leave out of the NDAA. Well, I got to say, one of the things that has happened that is upsetting is Hakeem Jeffries excised the China outbound investment provision. Everybody cleared that provision. The Speaker approved of it. Senate Republicans approved of it. Senate Democrats approved of it. The White House approved of it. At the very last hour, before finalizing the text of the NDAA, Hakeem Jeffries said no. Now, I'm going to read you this tweet from Michael Soblink. There's something like 8 rounds of edits on this provision, the China outbound investment provision. Hakeem Jeffries never raised any concerns or proposed any edits. They never objected to it. They never flagged it. And then just before midnight, he killed it. No one in the government expected this. Chuck Schumer's team thought it was a lock and told others as much. Supporters in the executive branch were congratulating each other for this position that blocks Chinese investment. The National Security Council of a Democratic administration does not understand what the leader of the Democrats in the House just did or why he did it. House Republicans think it's a personal attack on Speaker Johnson. Sounds like House Republicans are going to try to get it in the continuing resolution. So what does this actually do? This prohibits investment with the Chinese Communist Party. The China Outbound Investment Act also prohibits American citizens from investing with the Chinese Communist Party inside the United States. It's a pretty big deal. The Chinese Investment Act, let me just read you this from Michael Soblink at the Washington Examiner. The U.S. Congress intends to pass this piece of legislation. American companies and venture capital firms have enriched Chinese companies with direct ties to the People's Liberation Army. The evidence of U.S. complicity in problematic PRC industries is overwhelming. So the House and the Senate agreed that U.S. companies should be prohibited from investing with People's Republic of China entities that are involved in the persecution of the Uyghurs. Venture capital investments with the People's Liberation Army have exceeded $140 million in the last year, including in the development of nuclear weapons. So American venture capital firms would be prohibited from investing in People's Liberation Army companies that are developing weapons technologies for China. Everyone agreed to this legislation. At the very end, Hakeem Jeffries killed it. Why did Hakeem Jeffries kill it? Well, there's the speculation it's punishment to Speaker Johnson for getting something into the NDAA. What Speaker Johnson got into the NDAA was a provision that will prohibit the government from paying for the gender transition surgeries of people in the military and their children. There are some members of the military who want their children's gender transitions covered on American taxpayer dollars. Now, remember, there are some members of the House Republican Conference who have been attacking Mike Jeffries as not one of their own. Or Mike Johnson. They've been attacking Mike Johnson as not one of their own. Mike Johnson is a social conservative. Mike Johnson got a start in Louisiana politics arguing against the divorce laws in Louisiana, saying it was too easy to get a divorce in Louisiana. He's a big pro-life activist. Mike Johnson has always been a conservative, always been a social conservative. And Mike Johnson was able to, at the very last minute, thread the needle and get language into the NDAA that prohibits federal taxpayer dollars from being used to fund the gender transitions, particularly of minors. Federal government will not be able to use its money to pay for these things related to national defense. Hakeem Jeffries was too late. He couldn't take it out. So he decided to get rid of the China funding measure in response. The China funding measure will come back into the continuing resolution now. It can be put in there. The gender transition issue could not under the rules of getting the continuing resolution through. It's a big win for social conservatives, and the setback on China can be undone. It's notable how the Democrats decided to try to sabotage the measure at the end was going after military investments with China. It's a big win for conservatives. And also, here's the thing. Essentially, the government last week before the United States Supreme Court in Scrimity argued for government support of transitioning children. Mike Johnson, by blocking this measure, sets the stage now for the Trump administration on January 20th, while their Supreme Court is still drafting Scrimity, to send a note to the Supreme Court and say, hey, don't know if you noticed this, but the Republicans and Democrats in the United States Congress have agreed the government should not fund gender transitions for minors. This is a major change from the position argued by the Biden administration before the court, and you should take this into consideration when you're shaping your opinion in Scrimity. It's a big double whammy against the trans activists, what Mike Johnson was able to pull off. It's a huge win in that issue. Nobody seems to be paying attention to it, that he was able to get it through. And at the very last minute, he was able to get it through, and it's going to become federal law, and Joe Biden's going to sign it into law, and it completely upends Joe Biden's position on trans activist issues. It was a great play by Mike Johnson. He deserves a lot of credit. Now, I got to tell you about Old Glory Bank. It is my bank. It is a wonderful bank. I love Old Glory Bank, and you will love Old Glory Bank. And the way you can get Old Glory Bank is by going to oldglorybank.com. Look, y'all, let me just put it to you this way. Individual or business, Old Glory Bank was started by conservatives. Because of the debanking trends, conservatives are having their accounts closed by major banking institutions in this country. It's happened to Melania Trump. Her bank account was closed by a bank in New York. They didn't want to do business with the Trumps. Old Glory Bank, you're never going to have to worry about that. It was by conservatives for conservatives. It's a great bank, headquartered out of Oklahoma. They'd love to have your business. If you're a business and you're conservative, go to Old Glory Bank. It's worth moving your business to them. oldglorybank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender. They can do home loans. They can do car loans. They can do business loans. I've referred now a half dozen businesses to Old Glory Bank. Every single one of these businesses told me they were skeptical of doing business with an online bank. Every single one of these businesses moved to Old Glory Bank. 2 of these businesses needed loans. They were impressed with Old Glory Bank. Why? Because Old Glory Bank sent human beings to these businesses to sit down with the businesses, learn their business, understand what the business did, and they got loans approved. Their local banks knew less and had less of a relationship with them than the online bank they were using. That's what sets Old Glory Bank apart. They would love to have you and your business. I have my checking account and my savings account with them. oldglorybank.com. You can do it all there online. Takes less than 8 minutes. oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back. Tune in, if you will, please. At the top of the next hour, I will bring you the latest. We're starting to learn details about this individual who has been detained in Pennsylvania at a McDonald's from Altoona, Pennsylvania. And it sounds like this individual is a anti-capitalist climate change activist. I've been warning for a while these people were starting to turn violent, and this may be an example of that. So stay tuned for those details. But I listen, I got to apologize in advance to everybody for saying what I'm about to say. Those of you in the metro Atlanta area will be okay with it. I need someone to get Arthur Blank's attention. Arthur Blank one of the founders of Home Depot. Sir, at your advanced age, God bless you for all you've done. Whether we agree in politics or not, you're a great guy. But please, for the love of all that is good and holy on planet Earth, please either fix the Falcons or sell the Falcons. What you people did during the draft was absurd. You got all these quarterbacks, and none of them can perform. Kirk Cousins is a wonderful person. He hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since week 9 and has had 9 interceptions. Kyle Pitts is a bust. Terry Fontenot, the worst general manager, it seems, in football. Your organization is profoundly broken, sir. Please fix the Falcons or sell the Falcons so someone can fix them. You seem united or distracted by Atlanta United. Please deal with the Falcons, sir. Please.